Welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of the podcast St. Louis Cardinals Beyond the Hall of Fame Players, Saluting Unsung Heroes. I'm Tom Nance.
And I'm John Crost. We're excited to share with you the stories of unsung heroes of past Cardinal glory. We'll go beyond the headlines to explore the players who had supporting roles in Redbirds' success, who were the indispensable middle relievers that nailed down the victories in the 1964 World Series,
who had the clutch pinch hits that drove in crucial runs during the 1980 pennant teams,
which Cardinal player earned 3 World Series rings as a member of the Cardinals, Mets, and Toronto Blue Jays organizations.
The answers to these questions and others will be explored as we go beyond the headlines to put a spotlight on players who helped the Brocks, the Gibsons, the Hornsbys, and the Mutuals propel the Cardinals to their storied success.
And before we get to the first player to be recognized as an unsung hero, let us just share a bit about us so that you know who your hosts are. And my name is John Crost. I currently live just north of Monterey here in California, but have been a Cardinals fan for 60 plus years, ever since basically 1964, when I got to see my first baseball game on my birthday. And what about my co-host, the wonderful Tom Nance?
I'm currently living in Western Illinois, just outside the very small town of Prophetstown, where I grew up. I then moved to Chicago suburbs as an adult. Not an easy place to be a Cardinal fan, and then fortunately moved back to the Prophetstown area. My father was from Southern Illinois, which explains how I learned to love the Redbirds.
Yeah, so we are displaced Cardinals fans, about 2,000 miles apart from each other, chatting on the phone about our mutual admiration of St. Louis baseball and our interest in behind-the-headline stories. So how did we get together to do this podcast?
Yeah, being 2,000 miles apart, and we have never met in person. The only conversations we've had are over phone, just like we are right now. So it started when I saw a post by John on Facebook about Barney Schultz, the subject of today's episode. And when I read it, I was intrigued, and I thought, stories like this might work as a podcast that other Cardinal fans would enjoy through audio. So I reached out to John, and he was immediately excited about this venture. He's the guy bringing you the research and information, doing a lot of the heavy lifting here.
And Tom's doing a lot of the heavy lifting as well, as he's the guy with the podcast experience and the recording hardware. So we're putting our talents together to produce what we hope will be an enjoyable experience for you. Our format for the foreseeable future is to have a brief introduction about our featured ball player, followed by Tom narrating the story I've composed from various resources. Then we'll get together at the end to share some of our reactions to that player's exploits.
So there you have it. Let's get to it. John, we all know the proverbial saying, if at first you don't succeed, try again. But how many tries? For example, how long does a baseball player labor in the minor leagues before he gives up? Especially in the early years when pay was abysmal in comparison to today. How long does a player sacrifice a normal life or life on the road away from family, taking long bus rides from one minor league park to another, barely making a living?
Well, it's because people like Barney Schultz, who love the game and who won't let a dream die, who have heart, the desire, determination. Schultz slogged through the minor leagues for 17 plus seasons with only 2 seasons at the September call-up period before sticking around for a few seasons starting at the age of 34 and then through the age of 36, only to be back in the minors at the age of 37 before he would be making headlines.
That is heart. That is desire. That is determination. Well, let's take a look at what John has put together about Barney Schultz. Barney Schultz's 1964 season with the St. Louis Cardinals was insane, especially for its time. He would turn 37 during the season, and he started the season in AAA for the Cardinals. The bulk of his career was in the minors, but he had some call-ups to the majors. In 1961, he is called up mid-season by the Cubs and stuck around in the majors through 1963. However, in the middle of the 1963 season, he's traded to the Cardinals and finished the season in the majors for them. He was with Jacksonville, a Cardinals AAA affiliate for 1964, and gets the call-up for the August 1st game. Schultz epitomized being a journeyman, organizationally speaking. He was signed by the Phillies, then to the Tigers, then to a couple of independent minor league teams, then acquired by the Cubs, then to the Braves, and then to the Pirates, and finally to the Cardinals, with whom he would get his first shot at the majors at the age of 28. And to say he performed badly is an understatement. In 29.2 innings pitched, he gave up 28 hits, 5 for home runs, and 15 base on balls with an ERA of 7.89. He would be sent down to the minors again. Then once again to the Tigers, back to the Cubs, where he would get a call-up to the majors in 1961 at the age of 34, when he did pitch well. He then sunk into mediocrity the next 2 seasons in the majors, when he went back to the Cardinals and would be back in the minors for 1964. Schultz, in 1964, was having a career minor league season, as his ERA was 1.05 with a whip of 0.965 in 86 innings pitched. His previous best minor league season was in 1957 at the AA level with an ERA of 2.83 and a whip of 1.157 in 121 innings pitched. His 1961 minor league season was a little better than 1957, but he had only 49 innings pitched before being called up, and he did do well for the Cubs with a 2.7 ERA and a whip of 1.230 with 66.2 innings pitched. His following 2 seasons were mediocre ERA-wise. When he got called up to the majors for the Cardinals on August 1st, and 2 weeks shy of his 37th birthday, they were attempting to keep going strong as they went from 10 games out of first to 7 games out of first. While there was nothing in Schultz's relatively brief MLB career to suggest he would make such a significant difference, the organization must have figured he had something going, given how he had suddenly become a lights-out pitcher in the minors. Schultz, in the last 2 months of the season, would appear in 30 games, pitch 49.1 innings, earned 14 saves, surrendered just 35 hits, and 11 base on balls for a whip of 0.932. Just 1 home run, 0 hit by pitches, strike out 29 batters, have an ERA of 1.64 and an ERA plus of 234. But the part that was truly amazing occurred from September 25th to September 29th. The Cardinals had closed the gap to 3.5 games, and Barney would appear in all 5 games. He would pitch a total of 7.0 innings, give up just 1 hit, 1 base on ball, 0 home runs, 0 runs, face 21 batters, strike out 7 of them, help induce 2 double plays, and inherit 8 base runners. In the 5th appearance of that stretch, he would pitch 2.1 innings. The Cardinals were tied for first at the end of that stretch. Also, the 4th game of this stretch, he completed a game for Bob Gibson, as he would do again on the final day of the season just 5 days later. It would be the only 2 times in that final month Gibson would not throw a complete game. There is no way today a relief pitcher would ever throw 5 straight days, especially for that many innings. And considering the pressure he must have been under, it makes this all the more amazing. At one point during these last 2 months of the season, the stress once did get to Schultz. He was driving to the game with a teammate and pulled over to the side of the road. He told his teammate to switch places as he couldn't see. It was most likely a stress-induced hysterical blindness, as it never happened again, and he lived a healthy life afterwards. Here's to you, Barney. You got your chance to shine in one of the most stressful situations, and you more than rose to the occasion. You were one of the major reasons the Cardinals won the pennant and were able to go on and win the World Series. So there's the lowdown on Barney Schultz. If you're like me, even though you're a Cardinal fan, Barney Schultz does not ring a bell. I was intrigued by the story that John had put together for us about a number of things, but what tickled me the most was probably his name, Barney Schultz. It sounds like it ought to belong to your barber or the guy that delivers your mail. But no, professional baseball player who, as we heard in the story, journeyed for so long to have his brief moments in the sunshine that we were glad to bring to you.
Yeah, I mean, here's a guy, age 37, already spent most of his career in the minors, and after having one really good year with the Northside Chicago team, whose name I will not mention, and then a couple of years of mediocrity, then sent back to the minors after the Cardinals reacquired him because he started in the Cardinals organization originally. And then way back when, and then he goes in the last 2 months of the season, 60 games. He appears in 30 of them, pitches 49 and 1/3 innings, gets 14 saves. Now, mind you, this is the time of an era before relievers would get 30, 40 saves in a season.
Right.
Back then, if you got 20 to 25 saves, that was incredible. And that was over the course of 162 games. Here's Barney doing 14 in just 2 months. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, at one point, he would actually appear for 5 straight games. Yes, he was a knuckleballer. It's a little bit easier on the arm, but still, to do it for 5 straight games, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That no manager today would ever do.
No. They'd take a lot of heat for doing something like that. And John, tell us what's going on at the end of the 64 season that made Schultz's role so critical.
Well, the Cardinals, who were way out of first place at the All-Star break, the Phillies have been just cruising through. The Reds were the only team that had a chance at that point, it looked like, to catch them. And all of a sudden, the Cardinals just went on a tear. They would go something like 28-10 in the last 38 games of the season. And, every game became critically important. In fact, all those early victories became critically important now. And they're going into the end of the season. The last 3 games of the season against the lowly Mets. I mean, the Mets were still just a wretched, horrible team at that time. They had barely improved at all from the 1962 season. And they lose the first 2 games to the Mets of the series. The Mets were just the Mets had nothing to play for. They had nothing to lose. They could take whatever chances they wanted.
Yeah, playing free and easy.
Yeah. And during that month, too, the only games that Gibson was ever taken out of was just to have Schultz complete the game. Schultz was the only pitcher, apparently, only reliever, who was considered trustworthy enough to finish a game for Gibson.
Wow.
I mean, let's think about that. I mean, that just shows you how hot he was and that only he could come in to relieve Gibson and complete the game. So
didn't the Cardinals win that pennant by just a game?
Yes, they did. It was at the last game of the season, actually. They'd beaten the Mets. And, then they were waiting to see the results of the Phillies. And the Phillies pitching staff had been so injured, depleted by injuries, that they went to a 3-man rotation for the last 2-3 weeks. And Gene March, because he was desperate at that point. And they lost at the end of the season. I think, and the Reds had won. So if the Cardinals had lost, it would have been a 3-way tie for first. And so, here they do. They came on strong, and it was.
So by winning by only 1 game, the pennant, and this is before there was any divisions. There was no East or West division. Winning by 1 game made every game that Barney appeared in critical. If he had failed, the 64 season may never have had that outcome that we all enjoyed.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, they considered him. I mean, there's a few other players, not to lessen their load. I mean, that the Cardinals have thought about it, if they had only traded for Brock earlier, or they'd only called up Mike Shannon earlier, on and on. I mean, certain players who we will talk about in future episodes. Players like Roger Craig and Ron Taylor. Yeah, and by the way, that Roger Craig, yes, the Roger Craig who managed the Giants, who was actually a pretty solid pitcher, but just never made headlines. He would play great. A guy named Carl Warwick, pinch hitter, who had 3 key hits and a key walk during the World Series. I mean, you think about all the and other players who just came up with that one big game during that stretch too that just meant the difference between
failure
winning
and
and losing.
success. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Well,
I could go on.
Yeah, well, you're hitting upon what the gist of this podcast is about, and that is to take a look at these role players that help the Brocks, the Gibsons, the Mutuals, the Shannons, and other stars, help them as a team have success. But without the Barney Schultz, without the Roger Craig and the Ron Taylors, those guys couldn't have been the stars that they were. They had to have had critical people like Barney and others to play their roles and play them well.
Yeah, it's like the table setters.
Absolutely.
So to speak.
Absolutely.
That, made it possible for those other players then to be in a position to have their outsized skills and talent, shine through.
Great fun stories. And we look forward to bringing many more of them to you. We would hope to have conversations with people who were present about that time. Now, Barney, unfortunately, has passed away, so we're not going to be able to interview him. But we have other players that we are going to feature in our episodes that are still alive, and we hope to be able to interview them or family members or other players that can give us insight into that spotlight. Yes,
like Ron Taylor, who was also a member of the '69 Miracle Mets, and he played a critical role for them.
Yeah.
So he was the only player with playoff experience going into the '69 season on that team.
And there'll be much more of that in our upcoming episodes.
Exactly. So, but there's one thing we do need to talk about that just happened, unfortunately and sadly, just recently. And of course, we're talking about the passing of Whitey Herzog.
Yes, the White Rat.
Yes, and man who invented Whitey Ball.
And that they're talking about today. They were talking about that on the game broadcast yesterday when the Cardinals were playing the Mets, about how today's current Cardinals, while they hope to improve their home run output, and they will, but are currently having some success here, winning a few series in a row, but by playing Whitey Ball. In fact, they had they stole home base. They had a suicide squeeze, rather. It wasn't stolen. It was a great suicide squeeze that they scored a run the other day. And they're using some speed, great defense, and getting a lot of singles and doubles to get some wins here in the last couple of weeks.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes, and baseball seems to be not going all the way back to Whitey Ball, obviously, but it maybe moves towards incorporating some of that type of style of play again.
Absolutely. What's one of your favorite memories about Whitey?
Oh gosh, I would say it was I believe it was the 20th anniversary of the Cardinals '85 team, and the infamous call by Don Deckinger.
Yes.
Which is really bad because Don actually was considered, it's always been considered one of the best umpires ever to play the game. And umpires are going to make a mistake. Unfortunately, he had to choose that moment to be human.
Yeah.
Of all things, and there was a time when the umps got another call wrong for the Royals earlier in the game when they called Frank White out when he was safe for stealing second, and that could have changed the whole tone of the game too. So at the dinner, he actually invited Don Deckinger to the dinner, and he attended, and Whitey Herzog bought expensive Rolex or some kind of expensive watch for everybody that was at the dinner, including for Don Deckinger. And when Don Deckinger opened it up, the watch was in Braille.
I love it.
And Don took it all in stride. He said he just laughed. He just laughed and laughed. He just, he says it was unexpected, but he took it for the whole moment, and all that, knowing that it wasn't meant in anything malicious. It was all done in fun.
Yes. Well, it was a class act for Whitey to include him in that. As you said, it was a 20-year post celebration of the '85 team. That is class act to include him, and pretty funny to put the watch in Braille.
Braille, yes. I just that's just so classic.
Well, Whitey, we hope that wherever you're at, if you're able to take in some Cardinal games, that you can send them some good luck and well wishes. Rest in peace.
Yes, rest in peace, Whitey. You gave us 3 pennant winners and another World Series. Indeed. You know what? You really can't beat much better than that.
You bet. All right, well, that's going to wrap up inaugural episode. We're excited to bring this to you, and we look forward to you listening to future spotlights on our unsung heroes. John, you got something to say as far as wrapping this thing up?
Well, let's hope that the Redbirds can, get themselves over 500 again. They seem to be sort of scared of being over 500. I don't know why.
They'll get there.
They'll get there. And the team just thinks, they just gel together, and Arenado and Goldschmidt really, step up. Some of the other younger players step up and really find their groove. And
meanwhile, we'll put spotlight on some past successes.
Yes, and I plan on also I want to, just so people know, I'm going to try and get on the 44 teams, 1944 team, and 34 teams also. Players as well. I'm going to take a dive into those later in the year.
Excellent.
So, because that is before my time even, but
yes.
But I remember my dad talking about them.
Yeah, I look forward to learning more about that. So
yeah, I do too.
I'm eager about that.
It's going to be fun. And I will continue to beat the bushes for those unsung Redbirds and, shining the spotlight and singing their praises. Because they deserve, like history, to be remembered.
Thanks for listening to this episode of St. Louis Cardinals Beyond the Hall of Fame Players Saluting Unsung Heroes. Please share this with others and subscribe to the podcast, leaving a review when possible. Our episodes will be published bi-weekly on the second and fourth Monday of each month. We'd love to receive feedback by email where you can tell us about other unsung Cardinal heroes you'd like to feature. You can reach John and Tom at Tommy John's St. Louis Cardinals Podcast at gmail.com. It's all lowercase, Tommy, Gommy, John, JONSTL, Cardinals Podcast at gmail.com. Go Cards!